Cartel Wives, Chapter 17. I appreciate y'all being here with me. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, make sure you share. Let's get it.
This is going a little too far.
Oh, shit.
Olivia, not only was 2006 the best year business-wise for Junior and Peter, it was also one of my happiest years at home. I was so caught up with Brandon, trying to be a good wife and mother, that I stopped being a busybody and stayed out of Junior and Peter's business. I was obsessively in love with my family, encased in this bubble, in complete denial of what was really happening around me. But I didn't care. I felt safe and secure, and most of all, happy. I even let go of my music career. For 2 years, I'd been flying from Mexico to Miami to New York, then back to LA to record, and it became too overwhelming. Junior and I had devoted so much time bringing famous producers, songwriters, and engineers down from the States to Mexico City, and we'd spend weeks at a time in our recording studio working with them. We had strong ties and close relationships to music executives and top artists, and if there was a connection, it was ours. I was even presented with the opportunity to sign Drake before he signed to Cash Money Records.
God damn. That's, missed the boat. But again, who knows how that would have gone if they did sign him, whatever, things happen. Sometimes it has to be the perfect storm. It has to be the perfect explosion of kinetic energy for things to happen, for an artist to blow the way Drake did. Was his talent good enough for him to do that with whoever was marketing him? You know what I'm saying? Or was it meant that Lil Wayne had to show him to the world? You know what I mean? Who knows? But that right there, it's a lot of money y'all left on the table right there. In the least, getting him on paper somewhere, y'all might have still had a piece right now.
Music was too consuming, and the business was too demanding. My family needed me. I let my career slide, and Junior supported my decision. He just wanted me to be happy. With more time on our hands, Cancun became our favorite spot. We'd take the whole family down on long vacations with us, sometimes months at a time. And once we realized we were there constantly, we decided to buy a condo. All of Junior and Peter's wholesalers and employees came to visit, and when we weren't there, they used it as a vacation house. Sometimes Mia and Peter would watch Brandon while Junior and I would go to dinner. The next night, they'd head out to the same restaurant, and the waiters would give the guys dirty looks because they thought they were living double lives. During the day, we did family things like going out to the pyramids, or we'd take Brandon in the pool. He'd swim around with his floaties, then beg Junior to throw him up in the air and catch him as he came up from the water like a little fish. When he'd get tired, the three of us would lie in the cabana as he fell asleep on his daddy's chest. As we watched the sunset, Junior and I would hold hands. It was heaven, and I know I was just fooling myself, but at the time I thought, why try to fix something that isn't broken?
See, sometimes you just gotta ride out them good times as long as possible and just don't say nothing, cause you never know when shit's about to change.
Mia, it really was heaven. Peter and I moved into a 5,000 square foot penthouse that had been owned by the famous singer Alejandro Fernandez, the son of legendary singer Vicente Fernandez. It had white Italian marble everywhere, 20-foot ceilings and windows wrapped around from one end to another. The master walk-in closet was the size of a studio apartment, and the elevator opened up right at the front entrance. The only thing I had to worry about was how I looked and whether Peter was stressed about his day. I never had to cook or clean, and I always tried, but Peter wouldn't let me. "Mia, what are you doing?" he'd yell at me. "You better not be cooking." Then he'd come up behind me and kiss me. We never wanted to leave that house, and there we shared our deepest feelings and secrets with each other. There was hardly a minute when we weren't laughing about something. We'd sit on our balcony, listening to music, looking over the city every single night. We decided we were tequila connoisseurs, and we tried every top-shelf tequila known to man. Plus, their business was still growing by leaps and bounds. Chapo would check on Peter and Junior more often, and he always made a point to ensure that our family was safe. Life was just getting easier, and money was rolling in. Peter and Junior had branched out to Atlanta and New York and into Canada, and because of that, my husband's brain was just lighting up with ideas. Every day it was something new, made possible with the help of all the new people he and Junior had met.
Olivia.
Them boys had North America on lock. They even had the Canadians. Damn.
After their dad's kidnapping, Junior's friend Sobrino, who'd he'd met at Tony Roma's, set up a meeting with his uncle, La Puerca, or El Animal. His real name was Manuel Fernandez Valencia, and he was both Chapo's close associate and Mocomo's compadre in the BLO. Puerca lived in Mérida in the Yucatan in a beautiful 20,000 square foot hacienda with horse stables on his grounds. As Peter and Junior sat in one of his grand rooms, their voices echoing as they discussed business, Puerca told them he had his own tunnels from Mexicali to Calexico and his own routes to the border. They partnered with him, which allowed them to grab less work in the States and more in Mexico. Apparently, with greater risks came huge profits.
Mia. Through Chapo, they'd connected with one of his lifelong friends, Alfredo Vasquez Hernandez, and his wife, Maria. Chapo and Alfredo were so close that Chapo had named his son Alfredillo after him.
Listen, there's too many three-named individuals in these stories to keep up with it. Especially if in the book they're going to be changing the three names and interchanging them from what we heard in the podcast. You wildin' with the three names.
Alfredo was Chapo's logistics operator, making sure the cartel's drugs were loaded onto their trains, semis, or 747s. In Mexico, there was no credit, so Peter and Junior had to pay for their loads up front. Maria owned a currency exchange, and she started changing our money from pesos to dollars or vice versa, getting it from point A to point B. She would charge 5% from Chicago to Mexico and 3% from LA. This sounds like a lot. When they moved $20 million, she could net up to $1 million. But it was additional security because the money was guaranteed. Suddenly, they'd solved one of the difficult parts of getting money across the border. The cash was coming in faster than Peter and Junior could move it, so they invested in a private plane with Maria, paying $1 million each for it. Maria would go shopping and use her bags to take attention away from the suitcases of $5 or $10 million she'd picked up from Junior and Peter's workers at a small airport by the naval base in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or in Torrance, California, or in Long Beach, California. After she handed over the cash to them, Peter and Junior would reinvest it that day.
Olivia. Their infrastructure in LA was one of their biggest challenges. They had to build a machine from the ground up in a city that wasn't familiar to them, and it took research, time, and learning from other people's mistakes to bring together a great team.
They were definitely watchers. You know what I'm saying? Watching what the fuck is going on. How can this help us in what we're doing? How can that help us in what we're doing? How can we make this work? Functionality, super important. These fools was getting their money flipped from pesos to dollars, vice versa. Chicks with planes, like, you got to be observant. Again, like that conversation, I don't know if it was J or P, what they had with the dude. They just meet dude, they start talking small talk. Oh, yeah, the Cubs hat on. Boom, next thing you know, that's somebody they needed for something that they needed bad. I think it was a way to get Jay in front of the man to help Peter out. You know what I'm saying? Like, just from a chance encounter with somebody, those relationships are crazy. But then again, you meet somebody like that too. Next thing you don't know is that there's Saul Rodriguez, and now they got the tamale lady kidnapped and the eloteros kidnapped, and you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. So you never know who you're meeting, man. You gotta learn how to read people. Pay attention.
But it paid off. At their peak, the route through LA was so successful that they had 2 to 4 drivers on the road constantly. Junior and Peter always had a plan B. They invested about $600,000 in a furniture company that used trains to ship goods. They'd hide drugs in the walls of the rail cars. It was slow, but it was guaranteed with hardly any risk. The furniture company was their only legitimate business, but they also spent money on dozens and dozens of semis with hydraulic stashes that concealed their drug shipments. These semis and trains would bring the drugs into a city, but to get the drugs from place to place within that town, they commissioned custom-fitted cars. These vehicles were crazy. To get to the hidden drugs, you'd have to get in the car, fasten your seatbelt, put the car into drive, then press a certain button like the defrost or back window to trigger it.
Claro.
You'd hear this whoosh sound, and the whole back or floor would open using hydraulics. In these secret compartments, you could fit about 100 kilos, or maybe $1 to $2 million. Bigger vehicles like pickup trucks could hold 150 kilos. The people who drove these cars wore ties and dress shirts, like white-collar workers, not drug runners. They didn't want to attract the cops' attention, so they were clean-cut, and they didn't run red lights or speed. This was ground-level drug transport, but Peter and Junior had elevated it to an art form, with a fleet equipped with the latest technology.
Mia. With more direct control of transport, things became increasingly intense. Peter became such a micromanager, making up all kinds of rules for his workers. Don't even say where the stash house is over the phone. Or, walk through the house exactly the same way every day. Don't leave any mail in the mailbox. He'd make his people confirm accounts every time they went into the house, and if they took any kilos away from the stash, he would have them put them to the side, then recount the kilos that were there. He even made them wear gloves so they would never leave fingerprints on the kilos. He knew that cleaning up the mess from a problem was harder than just getting it right the first time.
Olivia. Their employee relationships got more sophisticated, too. They had this idea to build a team, so they'd have not only the best prices but also consistency. There are a lot of traffickers who don't have a steady drug flow, which means no cash flow, so no day-to-day workers. You need stable, happy employees who are on your team, pushing the drugs out and bringing the money in. This was a dangerous business, so the more comfortable you were with the people you worked with, the better. Junior and Peter spent a lot of time building trust and good relationships. They wanted serious commitments, not a bunch of one-night stands with suppliers or customers. That can cause a lot of trouble. You could end up with the wrong person and get burned.
Mia, with so much more to manage and so many more people, Peter and Junior went from having 20 lines each to 30 or 40 each. It was insane. They never put two people on one phone. Their cash counter at one stash in Chicago got one, the guy who delivers money got another, and the head of their furniture company had another. We would put little stickers on each phone.
Bro, it's enough to where when the do you get to sleep? When do you get to eat? It seems just like an exhaustive process. It doesn't stop. When you want to go sit on a beach somewhere, the game don't stop. A custody's on a 24-hour clock. Shit just don't end. It just don't stop like that.
On with someone's initials. These phones would last a few weeks, then they'd destroy them and get another burner phone with a new number. We even had one phone designated for pizza orders because in this business, you never had a home phone.
Olivia. Before Chapo met Junior and Peter, he'd never answer his phone. He had people do it for him. But seeing Junior and Peter with all those burner phones must have inspired him because he started doing it himself. He labeled them just like my husband and his brother did too. Those phones were the first thing Sean Penn wrote about in his Rolling Stone story about his meeting with Chapo. And when I read it, I just laughed and thought to myself, I bet Sean Penn thinks Chapo's so original. Little does he know.
That's my game.
Mia. Our husbands were so busy, but it didn't take them away from us emotionally. If anything, they wanted us closer to them. Having a wife and family took a lot of the pressure off, or at least some of it. Peter wanted his life to be as routine as possible outside of work, which is why he went everywhere with me. I remember once I was about to leave to get a manicure. "Where are you going?" he said. "To get my nails done." "I'm going with you." And he followed me right out the door. I sat under the UV light waiting for my polish to dry, and there he was with his bag of phones, just hanging out with me. It's not that he didn't trust me, and he wasn't worried I'd be hurt. After his kidnapping, we had security to make sure nothing ever happened to one of us. He just wanted to be with me, like a regular husband who was so bored he'd decided to join his wife at the nail parlor. I suppose it made him forget all his problems. I imagine it gave him a sense of peace.
Olivia, the Mexican government had started to squeeze the cartels in 2006 and 2007, and everyone from Chapo down was feeling it. They were reacting to it with full-on terror. On December 1st, 2006, Felipe Calderón was elected president of Mexico, and 10 days later, he sent 6,500 army troops to the state of Michoacán, just southeast of Guadalajara, to fight the cartels. They fought back, and over the next 6 years, almost 85,000 people would die because of cartel violence.
Crazy.
Mia, terrible things were happening near the border. In 2007, Chapo and Mayo went to war with the Juarez cartel in an attempt to take over the highly active, lucrative drug smuggling route from Ciudad Juarez to El Paso, a city of over 1.5 million that's just over the Rio Grande. Ciudad Juarez had always been different than its smaller sister city, but when the turf war began, the gap between the two grew even bigger. In 2007, Ciudad Juarez recorded 300 homicides. By 2008, that number hit 1,500. In 2010, there were over 3,000. Over all that time, El Paso's murder rate hovered around 3 to 5 per year. It was the safest city to live in the U.S.
Olivia, all during 2007, Junior and I took business trips to Ciudad Juarez, and we witnessed the mayhem. I remember seeing the streets filled with federal police. It was obvious that the Mexican government had sent up the army to fight the cartels. I would sit there and worry my head off, thinking I've never felt more unsafe in my life. Then I'd cross the border and go shopping in El Paso just to get away, and it was like night and day. The violence had gotten worse in Culiacán, too. When Junior and I would go there a few times a month, the newspapers would be full of pictures of dismembered people, their body parts scattered everywhere, or photos that showed dozens of bodies hanging from bridges, with banners on them sending messages to their enemies.
So she was comfortably bouncing back and forth. She wasn't no fugitive. Surprised they didn't pick up on that. 1 minute you watching the army sitting there waiting to deal with any cartel beef. You just cross the border, go shopping, no big deal.
Newspapers in Mexico are not like in the United States, where they blur out blood or gunshot wounds. There, they show everything. Those images were one of the things that pulled me out of the bubble I'd created after I had Brandon. When I saw them, I realized that could be Junior. I started thinking about these people's poor wives and kids who would have to grow up without a father. I'd been the wife whose husband got murdered, so I knew what it felt like firsthand. It was eating away at Junior, too. And with so many people dying because of the cartel wars, it would soon be too much.
Mia, then all this talk about submarines started.
Olivia, Chapo's transportation system had always been out of hand. To get drugs from Colombia to Mexico, he'd taken control of thousands of container ships and had a fleet of 747s. He had more planes than Aeromexico Airlines. In each plane, he took out the seats, then filled them with clothes or supplies, supposedly for humanitarian missions. He'd unload those goods in Colombia, then reload them with 12,000 kilos of coke. That's 14 tons. All that coke would make its way back to Mexico, where corrupt federal officials would help unload it. Then it would find its way via train, tractor-trailer, bus, or secret tunnel to the vehicles with secret compartments like my husband had built. These systems weren't foolproof, though, and Chapo was always looking to improve his transport, so he decided to invest in submarines. He bought one sub from the Russians, then started manufacturing others in Colombia for $1 million each. The plan was to have 10 submarines in the water at a time, holding 8 to 10 tons of cocaine each. That would be over $1 billion in the water, and Junior and Peter were invited to be in on the load. The subs were managed by different men Chapo and Mayo trusted. Alfredo Vasquez Hernandez was in charge of one of the subs, and he stopped by our house one day to talk to Junior and Peter. "How much do you want to put in?" he asked. "Let's do 1,200, Junior said. The way it worked out, though, is that when Alfredo put the load together, Chapo and Mayo would end up getting 20% or 2 tons for free. You know how much 2 tons is? It's like $20 million for free every time each submarine goes. It sure paid to be the boss. Junior and Peter were responsible for turning in their 1,200 kilos to the Colombians to load onto the sub. To do this, they started working with a close friend named Andy, who was their contact out of Colombia and a part of our extended family. He would purchase, mark, and deposit the work with the people in charge of loading the subs. If the bosses were ever short on kilos, he'd go to Colombia or Panama and put in the difference. Once the subs got to Mexico and were unloaded, guess what the cartels did with them? They'd sink them because they didn't want to risk sending them all the way back. Holy shit, I remember thinking. This is going a little too far. Sure, I knew about the 747s and the tunnels across the border, but submarines were on a whole different level. Only the Navy had submarines. Regular people didn't.
Not no more.
But at that point, we were far from being regular people. Yet we didn't try to change that till we almost lost our lives.
That was chapter 17. Basically, more logistics. Them telling us the state of what the army, and the new leadership in Mexico being brought in, what that looked like, how it made them nervous. We got more logistics, more ways that they move things around, and we got into submarines. Submarines, dog. What you gonna do with a submarine? And not only that, you toss in a submarine. It's a disposable submarine. At the end of it, we're gonna make this move. Boom, you get your free $20 million worth of work. Here's a submarine. Sink the submarine. Done deal. On everything rolling, floating, over water, underwater, in the air, on the ground, in the tunnel. There's just 3, 4 dimensions. 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions of work and money. Passing across, passing across, passing across.